Good evening, everyone. This is Vibha Nashin, and you are listening to Messages from Master by Dr. Brian Weiss, Chapter 2, Part 3. She has her own place. I'm watching her. Andrea was more the observer now, watching herself in that lifetime on the Great Plains. Good. You can watch her or you can go into her, whatever you are more comfortable with. She lives all by herself. She did not marry? Never found anybody. She always thought she was good for any of those boys. She's not lonely. She's got sort of a ranch, and there are people who work for her. They like her. She's fair. Andrea's voice trailed off as she watched the scene. I began to progress her ahead in time. So she's very, very competent. She has made her own ranch. She has employees and is very capable. This was a difficult for a woman of those times. She must be very strong. Let's go to the end of her life now, to the very last day, the last moments. If it is at all uncomfortable, you can float above it. But if not, stay with it. On the count of three, let it all come into focus. The very last day of your life. One, two, three, be there. Go ahead and see what's happening and if anyone is around. Andrea seemed very calm. There's nothing exciting. She's just very peaceful. She's old. Nobody's left anymore. But she's okay, Andrea added. She's had a really good life and she's not sick. She looks okay. She's just old. She's got a white dress and with a high neckline. She's just sitting there, just looking out, just sitting on the porch. Is that where she dies? I think so. Just float above now. Float above. Leave that old body. You'll feel so light and free as your spirit floats above. Perhaps you can look down and see her, her body there below. And then, feeling so free and so light, review that life, the lessons that she learned, what you learned. What did you learn? What did she learn? She learned not to be afraid of being alone. She learned to take care of herself. Andrea answered from a higher perspective. Yes, to be independent, I observed. Very independent. She really liked her life. People made fun of her because she never got married and she never had children. She never seemed to care. The people in the community liked her. They stopped making fun of her later in life. People liked working for her. She had lots of cattle. In the floating state, now see if you can become aware of what happens next. You've left the body, you're floating. What happens next? What do you become aware of? I'm going up, and she's getting smaller. I'm just floating. I'm just in a blue light. I'm just floating. Good. Feeling okay? No more illness? Not cold? Just floating. Your conscious goes on. What happens next? Or do you just stay floating? There are just rays of blue light, and they are coming above the left side of my head. But it's a big cone of blue light, and I can't see beyond the cone. Again, a long period of silence followed. Is there anything more? I finally asked. wanting to know more about the cone of blue light. No. Okay, are you ready to come back now? Andrea nodded yes. Good. Make the connections before you come back between her life on the prairie and her independence and yours. Television cameras or not, Andrea was learning some important lessons. She quietly progressed her new data. Then she smiled broadly. I really like her. That's good. You have a lot of her strength. You have carried that over. This is very good. And also, you know that your brother is back. So, death is not what it seems. People come back. I missed him so much. Another twinge of sadness crossed her face. I know, I answered. But she still became very strong and independent. Relationships are very important, and independence is too when they are balanced. And he's back. And this time, even though it was a little precarious when he was an infant, he lived this time. So, you could be reunited. That's how souls work. And love works. We are always being reunited. So let go of any sadness or fears of loss that way. We always come back together again and again. Remember also the love and the proud obnoxiousness of your father, the love of your mother coming into this life with you again. The recognition that was there. They were on the prairie too. The happiness of the snow and your dog, your father and his parka, all of that love that you have carried through in this life, where you have managed to have relationships and independence and strength and love, and you have balanced it all. You've done all of these in a wonderful balance. That's wonderful. So, feeling her strength and independence and your ability to make really good relationships brings all this positive thought and feeling back to you. At this point, after digesting all this information and experiencing so many emotions, Andrea looked tired. I decided to awaken her. She had learned enough for the day. In a few minutes, I'm going to awaken you by pressing upwards on your forehead at a point between your eyebrows. When I press upwards, you can open your eyes and you will be awake. You will be alert and in full control of your body and mind, feeling wonderful, feeling great, lighter, as if a load has been lifted off your shoulders. Because the sadness from losing the brother of that time will be gone now. You know he's back. And feeling so peaceful, so relaxed, and yet in full control. When I press upwards, you can awaken completely. I pressed upwards on Andrea's forehead and she slowly awakened. Take your time and come all the way back. You did fine. How do you feel? Pooped. Pooped? I repeated, empathizing with her. I became aware that I was tired too. My concentration had remained strongly focused. It's intense. A lot of work. Was it what you expected? I didn't know what to expect. I never expected to see my brother. I thought I would see maybe one of my daughters, but she wasn't there. I felt like I was being pulled at another time, a different life, but I couldn't get there. I just couldn't get there. I could see where it was, but I couldn't get there. A third place? Yeah, I couldn't get there. Hmm. Do you know what was the time? No, It was before that prairie lifetime, but I just couldn't get there. It was like there was this stream of blue light, and it was a pure cone, and it just ended. Like the first one, where it was completely surrounding me, and I just suddenly saw feet. This one was, I could see the edge of the light, and you could tell where it just stopped. It was dark on the outside. I was like someone had taken a cone and put it over me. It ended, and it was like right there. Apparently, Andrea could glimpse the other past life, perhaps a lifetime with her daughter, but she could not navigate past the brilliant blue light. It's just to let you know that it's there, but it wasn't for now. That's okay. It's there too. And you've had connections with your daughters, I'm sure also. But you found your brother, not what you expected. That's one of the characteristics of this. You don't always get what you expect. That was a surprise. But apparently, there was some sadness. Andrea immediately concurred. It was such a surprise because it's such a happy lifetime this time. My brother and I are very close, but of all the kids, he's the one who was sick right after he was born. But I didn't expect to see his face. And the intensity of the emotion is very powerful because it's right there and it's so real. You could feel the sadness, you could feel the separation, but when you were 7 or 8 in this life, you felt the positive emotion of walking with your father, which was a very, it was a great memory, she interrupted. Yes, that was a great memory, I agreed. Andrea's eyes seemed to glaze over as she once again recalled the childhood scene. I could feel the wind on my face. I could remember the snowflakes. I could see it all. I could remember every bend of those street lights. I had forgotten them, she marveled. I think we remember everything, I added. So this is one of the way to remember that kind of detail, that feeling of snowflakes, the bend of the road, how your feet felt, all these feelings. It's more than emotion, physical sensations too. So everything I talked about, I'll remember, and then more? Sure, you remember more. For example, I'll let you linger a while with the birth thing. I couldn't get out of her, Andrea remembered. It was dark and it was a long tube, and I couldn't get out of her. You were taking longer there. I thought you were out. That was the darkness you encountered. You weren't just born yet, but you remembered a man coming into the next bed to want to have sex with his wife who had just delivered a baby, and that was vivid to you, and yet you were just born yourself. That was interesting too, that kind of detailed memory would come to you. My mother was not happy, Andrea repeated once again. I know. She turned me away. She turned me. Andrea was remembering even more details now. Even though awake now, she could still recall the hospital scene. She would probably have left the room if she was stronger, I added. Andrea snapped back to the present time. Is there a norm for a first time? Andrea asked, returning to her role as a reporter. Perhaps about 50% will have some sort of memory, but yours was so vivid and so intense for the first time that it would be like in the upper 15 or 20%. Only about 15% of the people can do that. And this technique would work for you at many different levels, not just memories. I added, you can learn to control your body. For example, If we needed to lower your blood pressure, you could probably do it this way without medicine. Fall asleep like that, I said, snapping my fingers. You could have gone like that. You can use it for physical reasons, for health reasons. If there were phobias, we could find a cause and get rid of them. There were some places I have traveled where I have always thought I have been before. The West is one of them, Russia is another. Even after the television cameras were turned off and the recording ceased, Andrea remained in a calm state, musing about her experiences during the regression. He was killed by a long gun, she added, by a rifle, not a pistol. She was adding details. People undergoing regressions are aware of hundreds of details, many more than they supply during the questioning, while they are immersed in the trance state, remembering the childhood and past life experience. She continued to reflect and remember. When John was born in this life, he was jaundiced. The nurses came to take him for treatments, and my mother said to them, I'll probably never see him again. He's probably going to die. When her mother had handed her newborn son to the nurses, she began to detach somewhat from her baby, in a sense preparing for his death. Although she loved him very much, this guarding of her emotions existed even after John gained strength and his health dramatically improved. In a sense, her mother was always anticipating the death of his child. In cases of newborn jaundice, which is fairly common, the liver chemical bilirubin is temporarily elevated, causing jaundice or a yellowing of the skin. Putting the baby in a natural light or under lamps of a certain light frequency is usually enough to break down the excess and restore the skin to normal. As the liver matures, the jaundice is entirely cured. This whole healing process may take only a few weeks or days or two. Andrea's mother overreacted to her son's newborn jaundice. As the wife of a doctor, she must have realized that John's life was not in jeopardy. According to Andrea, John was always aware of his mother's reserve, although he had no understanding of why he was singled out this way. Do you see a connection? I asked Andrea. Your mother was also John's mother in that prairie lifetime last century. He was killed then. She lost him. When he came back as her infant son in this life and then developed jaundice, she remembered the previous loss. Perhaps she didn't remember consciously, but emotionally or subconsciously she did remember. So she protected herself by keeping her emotions in check. She couldn't bear to lose him again. She really believed he was very fragile like before and that he would leave her again. Andrea was ready to burst with excitement. Her regression had explained the relationship between her mother and her younger brother. She now knew the real roots of her mother's behavior and her brother's reaction to the protective barrier his mother had erected in case she lost him again. Andrea would explain everything to them. From the many regressions I have facilitated and studied, Andrea's was a classical one filled with healing memories, intense emotions, and vivid recollections of details. Moreover, she possessed a superconscious ability to learn the lessons of her past lifetime and to connect them to the lessons of her current lifetime. The television segment never aired. An executive at the network feared that because the piece was so vivid and so emotional, Andrea might compromise her credibility as an objective reporter. Thus, millions of people were deprived of the chance to learn more about the nature of life, about how we are all connected and responsible for each other, about the horrors and devastation of killing, and how the effects of violence spill over into subsequent lifetimes. After Andrea made the connection between her brother's past life and her mother's current life fears, she grew silent. I could see that she was still contemplating, still experiencing the intense feelings the regression had triggered. I, too, grew silent. This was a private time for her, and I did not want to interview her further in front of her television colleagues. Often, these experiences can be both intense and transcendent, too personal to share, so I simply looked at her radiant face. I was filled with great compassion for the individual beside me, and my heart was lifted. My own consciousness began to shift. The hot, crowded room faded away. The traffic noises, sirens, and constant background chatter of human voices ceased. I was no longer completely aware of my body. I became aware of a beautiful light in the periphery of my vision. A voice whispered at the borders of my mind, at the extreme edge of my awareness. I believe it was a master. When you look at another person in relationship, in therapy, in life, see their soul through lifetimes and eons of time, not just the transitory physical being across from you. You too are such a soul. The voice spoke softly and lovingly and with deep compassion. This was advice, not criticism. I gazed gently back at Andrea, seeing both her and the frontier girl. I knew she also had many other lifetimes, many other names, but her soul was always the same. I needed to see that part of people which remains constant, their souls, not their transitory physical forms, to really understand and to help them and also to help myself, for I am too such a soul. You are as well. Many of my patients who have recalled distant memories similar to Andrea have similar experienced a dramatic diminishing or even the disappearance of their chronic symptoms. For example, I regressed a 50-year-old South American woman who suffered from profound claustrophobia, a fear of being trapped in small or enclosed places. She had been afflicted with this phobia since her early childhood. In the regression, she remembered being entombed alive when she was an Egyptian slave whose owner, a relative of the pharaoh, had died. It was the custom for some slaves to be buried alive with the noble so that they could serve him in the afterlife. The slaves were given a poison to ingest before they suffocated in the small enclosed interior of the burial tomb. After this memory, her claustrophobia disappeared and has never returned. What is the mechanism of this clinical improvement? I believe there are at least two explanations, although other factors are assuredly also at work. In my experience, the recall of repressed or forgotten traumatic, often painful memories is often associated with healing. Recalling these events with their associated emotions, called catharsis or abreaction in clinical terms, in a cornerstone of psychoanalysis and other traditional psychotherapies. The very act of bringing such buried memories into consciousness is extremely helpful. My findings indicate that the therapeutic arena needs to be enlarged, and we cannot stop the psychic archaeology at childhood or even infancy. but that past life patterns and memories also must be excavated for complete healing to occur. The second reason that these memories promote clinical improvement is that as we experience ourselves in other bodies and in ancient times, as we watch our many deaths and recall rebirths, we are filled with sure and unerring realization that we are eternal souls, not just individual bodies. We never really die, we merely change our levels of consciousness. Because our loved ones are immortal too. We are really not separated from them. This realization of our true spiritual nature is a powerful healing force. Just as each facet of a diamond mirrors the whole, Andrea's regression experience reflects the major themes of this book. She recalled memories and feelings from the fetal state before she was actually born. She was also aware of her parents' emotions, demonstrating that conscious is non local, not limited to our physical bodies or brains. This alone implies that when we die, our consciousness survives and goes on, since it is not physically based. Of course, memories of dying in past life and of what happens after death also confirms the continuing existence of consciousness. Andrea, for example, was able to observe the old woman's body as she had just vacated. Andrea was able to recall incidents that happened mere moments after her birth in this lifetime. Infants and young children are aware of so much more than we suspect. They are aware of our emotions as well as our actions. The flow of our loving feelings and thoughts to them, both before and after birth, nourishes their souls and is vital for healthy development. Through memories recalled during her regression, Andrea learned how past life and prenatal events can profoundly influence current life connections. Andrea found her current parents and brother in her past life memory. She learned that we are always reunited with our loved ones. Sometimes the reunion occurs on the other side, in other dimension. Sometimes the reunion takes place in a future lifetime together back here on earth. She was able to discern which values in life are important and which are unimportant or even damaging. She learned about the pain that guns and violence can cause. Every life is precious. After she died in her lifetime on the Great Plains, Andrea found a cone of beautiful blue light. There are many other descriptions, both later in this book and in other sources, of people encountering a beautiful and replenishing light after leaving their bodies. This encounter occurs during NDE, which is near death experiences, and apparently after death as well. A loved relative or friend or a spiritual being is often waiting at the light to greet the out of body traveler and to impart information or messages. Messages from the other side, as well as other forms of psychic or paranormal phenomena, will be explained in much more detail in a later chapter. We all possess intuitive abilities far beyond what we realize. As you integrate the stories, experiences, and exercises in this book, you will be able to hone your intuitive perceptions and receive information and messages more directly. Some of you will become healers for others. The energy of love pervades and unifies Andrea's entire regression. Her parents' love, her love for a brother, the reunion with loved ones. Even the cone of blue light felt very warm, comforting, and loving. She later confided to me. Andrea's experience of this energy in several of its manifestations will allow her to express her own love more openly and completely in her current life and relationships. She will also be more comfortable in accepting the love of others because love flows both ways, encompassing both giving and receiving. Ultimately, Andrea's profound regression experience will lead her to a greater understanding of the nature of her life and soul. Such an understanding is a sacred step. Such steps are accompanied by positive changes in the present life, better physical and emotional health, healthier relationships, more happiness and joy. As you share the experiences of the people you will meet in this book and ponder the messages of the masters and consider my stories and reflections, I hope that you will be walking these steps to wisdom. Once you begin, you will approach the obstacles and frustrations in your life with more patience and calm. Through understanding your past lessons and debts, you will remember your goals for the current life. You will feel fulfilled and no longer confused or lost. You will learn to overcome fear, anxiety, and grief. You will live your life more fully in the present moment, and you will enjoy its pleasures more completely. Above all, you will understand what we all have in common. We are all beyond life and death, beyond space and beyond time. We are all immortal and we exist throughout eternity. So, friends, this brings me to the end of chapter 2. For chapter 3, I'll reconnect with you tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. once again. Till then, take care, stay safe. Goodbye.